Hello, my name is Mark Schneider. Today we're going to go over the process of putting together a standard digital system. We're going to go over every aspect of it, removing the server from the pallet, unpacking the computers, loading the computers, wiring the system, and powering it on. All right, let's get started. When you first receive your system, it'll come on a large pallet like this. Obviously, it's going to be probably dropped off in your parking lot, and you're going to have to take it all apart before you bring it inside. First thing you want to do is take these bandings off. If you have a pair of tin snips, that works great. If not, you can use a big pair of scissors, or I use wire strippers. Careful when you cut these because they might have a lot of spring to them and they might flip around and hit you in the head, so you want to make sure you're protected. And after that, just go ahead and cut open the plastic and unwrap it. So once you get the plastic off, you'll see a couple different pieces. Obviously, the largest item is the server. There might be a few other things put on the pallet, but these are the main essential pieces that you need for the rack itself. You're going to have a flat screen computer monitor here. This is what's called a power file. This is our disk changer. The smaller computer case is going to be our management computer. And then you're going to have multiple larger computers. This is going to be your processor and your streaming computers. So now we just want to go ahead and pull these off the pallet and get ready to get the server inside. Now we're ready to go ahead and take the server off. First thing we want to do is take this box off. It's pretty thick cardboard, so the easiest thing to do is just go ahead and lift it right over the top. As you can see, the server is quite tall. It's about 6.5 feet tall, and it's not going to fit through any typical doorways. So what we're going to do is we need to move it, and we need to kind of get it on its side, and it weighs about 400 pounds. So what we want to do is reduce some of the weight. First thing I suggest is taking all the doors off. There are 4 doors on it. Typically, the keys are attached to the front of the main door here, but they might be in a box. But all you're going to do is just go ahead and unlock all these doors and just take them off. There's a little bit of a trick to the front ones and the back ones. There's a little latch up here. As you can see, you just kind of pull this down and the whole door will kind of tilt off. You just lift it right off and get out of the way. So before we go ahead and remove the power supply, we want to remove all the wires from the back. This is probably the most commonly forgotten one. This Ethernet cable needs to be removed, and then the rest we just have some power cords here. Simply just unplug them, let them hang. And then we also need to untie this power cord here. And then just lay it on top. So once you have the cables removed, we're going to go ahead and remove 4 screws on the front of this unit, and then we're going to slide the whole thing out. Be very careful when you take these screws out. They're a little soft and you don't want to strip them because they're very difficult to get out once they're stripped. You want to make sure you use a number 2 Phillips bit. You can do it by hand or with a drill, but just like I said, take your time, make sure you don't strip it out. This unit weighs about 150 pounds, so I definitely recommend having 2 guys or maybe even 3 lift it out. All we're going to do is just slide it forward. Grab both sides, just get it out of the way. Now we're ready to go ahead and lift the server off the pallet. Everything is zip tied, so you don't have to worry about anything falling out. The only thing is sometimes this keyboard tray gets unlocked, so just make sure that's locked in place. And then you can just pretty much tilt it any way you like. We're going to tilt this one forward. Have 1 guy or 2 guys on the front, have another one on the back, and he can just go ahead and grab the wheels there. Get to lift it right off the pallet, and then just walk it into the room. Now that you have the server in your final resting place, we can go ahead and put the power supply back in. Same process, just make sure the rails on the side line up. Go ahead and just push it back. We're not going to go all the way back at first because we do need to push this power cord through the hole in the back. When you first received your unit, the power cord was zipped up to the top here. What we're going to do now is we're going to push it through this little brush area, and that way you can put the back doors and the side doors on and close everything up and still have access to the power cord. So we're just going to push this through here. Just feed it through the bottom. And now we can go ahead and slide the power supply all the way back. Now that the unit is in place, we can go ahead and connect all the wires again. We have the far cable on the side here. This is the USB connection. And the rest are just power cords. And you just kind of have to go by the length of them to see where they plug in. Doesn't matter which plug goes where, as long as the cable reaches. Once you have the wires connected, you can come around to the front and go ahead and re-secure the power supply to the rack. Same 4 screws. Again, just take your time, don't strip out the threads. Before we load up the server with various computers and the power file and so on, we're going to spin it around and cut some zip ties off the back. If you have quad with your system, there's going to be 4 gray wires here. You can go ahead and just cut that zip tie. And again, if you have quad, you're going to have a big zip tie across the middle here. On the back, you're going to have a few more here. Kind of the rule of thumb is if you see a zip tie that has a large piece hanging off, that means we don't need it, and you can just go ahead and cut it off. As for the rails, you're going to have zip ties on the right and the left. And you're going to see these large purple and blue and green wires, and all those you pretty much want to release. So we're going to undo this top one, which is for the for the processor. Next one down will be the streamer, and then you're going to do the same on this side. You have a green one, you have a couple up here. So again, just remove any zip ties that have these large pieces hanging off them. The first computer to go in is the management computer, and that's the skinny one. It's real obvious. It's the smallest of the computer boxes. The one below it is going to be the processing computer, and the next ones below that are going to be streaming computers, and the boxes are labeled. So I'm going to start with the management, and you're just going to open up the box. Inside the computer, you're going to see a couple rails. We do need to attach these ahead of time to slide it into the rack. Now we're going to go ahead and attach the rails. You'll see a little bag on here with some screws. Now, it doesn't matter right or left. The only thing you need to do is make sure that this latch is towards the back of the case. And then you'll see how the holes line up. Before we slide the management computer in, we're going to have to pull these little rails out all the way to the front. Just reach underneath. They have some ball bearings. Just slide them all the way forward. And now, we're just going to rest the computer onto these little rails here. Sometimes you have to push the side in. And once you get it in, you'll hear a little clicking sound. And then you're just going to push this little latch in on each side and slide the computer in a little farther. Gets a little harder in the end, but just go ahead and just shove it all the way in, and that locks it in place. Now we can go ahead and work on the processing computer. Like I said, the boxes will be labeled either with a Sharpie or there'll be some kind of a label on it. So processing is the next computer we're going to open up. As you can see, this computer already has the rails on it, so we're just going to go ahead and slide it in. But first, we do need to pull these little bearing guides out. And they come out pretty far. You just want to pull them out 6 inches or so. Give yourself a little room. Now we're ready to go ahead and put the processor in. This computer does weigh about 50, 60 pounds, so you can have some help if you like. All we're going to do is same thing. We're just going to line up these little rails here. And you do have to kind of push on one side to get them to lock into place here. Sometimes you have to jiggle the other side. And once you get it in, just kind of use your hip and so you're just pushing it in, and it's going to stop at a certain point. And all you're going to do is you're going to lift up this little latch on one side, and you're going to push the same latch down on the other side just to get it past that certain point. Once you get it past there, just go ahead and shove it all the way in and it'll lock into place. Now we're ready to load the rest of the streamers. Depending on how big your system is, depends on how many streamers you have. Each streamer is capable of 62 channels, so if you have a 124 channel system, you're going to have 2 streamers. They are typically labeled streamer 1, streamer 2, streamer 3. So we're going to just start with streamer 1. That one's going to go on top. The rest are just going to go right below, and you're going to do the same process you did with the processing computer. Next unit we're going to put in is the power file disk changer. Any piece of advice I'd like to give you on this one is just be careful with it. This is a very expensive unit and we don't manufacture it, so if something goes wrong with it, we do have to send it back to the factory. Just to take your time with this. Don't shake it up, don't drop it. And it's just going to lay right on this shelf here. Slide it back, make it flush. One of the last things we're going to put on the front is the monitor, and it just pops open here. The monitor you get might be a little different. There's nothing unique about them. The only thing that's kind of changes a little bit is the way the foot gets attached. This one's pretty simple here. Just clips right on. This unit itself just has a simple power cord on the back, and then we have the cable that's going to connect to the computers. So we're just going to throw this cable in back, and there should be a pre-wired power cord for you, which is hanging off the side. Just going to connect that right into the back here, and just line it up front. Now we're done with the front. So if you purchase quad with your system, you're going to need to hook up what's called a quad STB. You're going to have 4 of them, and each one of these generates your quad signal. One for A, one for B, one for C, one for D. And these are just going to lay on this shelf right here. And you're going to have these gray Ethernet cables hanging off to the side. It doesn't matter which one they plug into, they all communicate the same. I just usually go by length, make sure they reach. So the gray cables are going to come from the right. You're also going to have some power cords that are coming from the left. And these are just going to plug into the top here. The last wire we need to connect to the quad STBs are these little video wires. There's a BNC on one side and there's an RCA on the other. If you look here on the back of the quad splitter, you'll see 4 connections, A, B, C, D. These correlate to the STBs, so we're going to run a wire from A, plugging into A, B to B, and so on. So we're just going to connect this cable in here. I'm going to run it right on top of this KVM switch. And then there's a jack on the back here. It says video. Plug it right in there. I'm going to do the same for B. Another wire we need to connect is from the monitor. That's going to connect to the back of this KVM switch. It's going to plug in here where it says console. Just so you understand what this device does is it allows you to control your keyboard, mouse, and monitor through various computers. So we basically have a monitor and a keyboard and mouse connected here, and then we have our various computers connected here so we can access them all from the same screen. Now we're going to move down to the back of the power file unit. This device you see here is a modem. Everything's pre-connected already. The only thing you might ever have to hook up is the phone cord. There is two jacks. The jack that goes from your wall to the modem will go to this outside jack, and if you wanted to hook up a phone for some reason, it would connect here. It's not really properly labeled. You have to lift it up to see the labels on the bottom. So there's your modem. Another connection we're going to hook up here is a FireWire cable. This is going to go into the back of the power file, and it can plug into any one of these three jacks. Doesn't matter which one. Just go ahead and slide that in there. Now we're going to plug in the power cord. This is going to go on the far right here. Go ahead and connect that. Now we're going to move down to the management computer. You have all these various cables hanging. Here we have the other side of the FireWire. This is going to connect to the back of the computer. Again, it doesn't matter which jack you put it in. We have this monitor here, which is a communication cable that goes to the modem. That connects right in the middle there. We have this yellow Ethernet wire. That's going to plug in the far left. When you look at these different wires coming from the KVM switch, you're going to want to grab the one that's zip tied to the right side of the rack. That's going to go for the management computer. The wire that you see hanging, that's going to go to the top computer, which is a processing computer. Go ahead and twist it on, make sure it doesn't fall out. And then lastly, we have a keyboard and mouse connection. And these are color coded, so purple and purple and green. Power cord here. Plugs in the far left side. Another wire we need to connect to the management computer is this USB cable. This actually communicates with the power supply on the bottom. And this one gets wedged right in the center of all these right here. Plugs right in. Now we're just going to go through and connect the back of all these different computers. The processor has a few extra cables than the streamers do. This is one of them. This connects to the modem itself. And there's two spots that this can plug in, here and here. We're actually going to plug it in over here. Keep in mind that your computer may look a little different than these. Sometimes we change vendors, so there might be jacks in different spots or so on, but we'll label the back of the computer for you, or we'll give some alternate instructions. The other KVM cable that we have, this is going to plug in right here. Again, we want to twist all these in place just to make sure they don't fall out. And again, we have our mouse and keyboard wires. I'm going to plug right in here. Now this green Ethernet wire, there's two jacks here. We're going to plug it into the jack on the left. This is actually quite critical. One of these jacks is what's known as a gigabit switch, and the other is a 100 megabit, so if you plug it in here, everything's work really slow and just not work properly. As we move over to the right, like I said, we're not going to use these. We're not using the FireWire jacks. We do have this extra yellow wire here. This is going to plug into this Ethernet jack. And all we have left over here is this power cord. Now we're just going to go down to the next computer. Same thing, we have a power cord that plugs in here. We have the yellow Ethernet jack. We have our green Ethernet wire. Again, we want to use the jack on the left. Go down to the next streamer. Ethernet jack. Another Ethernet jack. Power cord. And we have the KVM wires for both computers. That one connects here. We have the last KVM wire. And again, our mouse and keyboard wires. And that's everything you need to connect. Now that we have everything connected, we're pretty much ready to plug it in. I want to make one side note that if for some reason we preloaded your movies for you, you're going to want to disconnect the power file from the FireWire cable before you do a mass load on the disk, before you apply power. This is very important. Since we stopped doing this at the time of this video, it's probably not going to happen, so you can just go ahead and plug in the power now. We do recommend that you use a dedicated 20 amp breaker for the outlet and don't have anything else connected to it. A fully loaded system is going to pull about 10 amps, so you don't want to have any extra load on the outlet. So we're ready to go. Let's go ahead and plug it in. So once you have it plugged in, we need to turn the power supply on. It's this button right here with the little lion on it. It says test. Just press that. You'll hear some initial startup on the computers. It's just temporary. It's going to kick the fans on. It's going to be in standby mode. So now we can go ahead and turn on some of these components. Some things will turn on by themselves, some things won't. The power file typically is off. We're just going to go ahead and hit the power button right here. That'll turn on. The routers, everything here is automatically comes on. The processing computer and streaming computers need to be turned on in a specific order. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to flip this little latch open here. It just kind of spins up, and then the door is going to come down. You're going to see a switch right here in the middle. We just press on it, and it'll pop right back out. The computer will start up. We want to wait about 30 seconds for this computer to start up, and then continue to turn the other ones on. So just let it sit there for a minute, lock it back up. After about 20-30 seconds, open up the streamer door, press the power switch, close the door, do the streaming computer, power switch, close the door. Once we have the processor and the streamers on, we can go ahead and turn on the management computer. Do this by flipping this little door open, and you have a black and a red switch. Just go ahead and flip the black switch. That'll turn on. Now that you have the system powered up, we can go ahead and run the booth cables. You can run the booth cables before or after, but sometimes we just do it afterwards to make sure we have the link light as we plug them into the various booths. What we're going to do is we're going to actually run the cables through the back top of the system and then feed them through the front. We're going to connect the Ethernet wires to the front of the switch here, and on the back side of the quad splitters where your BNC cables are going to connect. So let's go get the wires and get started. When you go to unroll your booth cables, you're going to notice there's two ends on this, and they're a little different. This side we have a longer Ethernet wire, and this side they're dead even. This is the side that connects to the booth, and this is what's going to connect to the system. Now when you go to unroll these wires, it's very important that you unroll it like you're unrolling a garden hose, which means you want to hold the whole cable and you want to let all the cable run out this way. What happens if you just kind of lay it on the floor and pull it out like this, you're going to end up with huge knots and twists. And if you put too much of a twist or a knot in these cables, you can actually break the connections inside. And once it's run through a ceiling, that's the last thing you want to try to fix. So once we get our cable all rolled out, we're going to put all of them together and then run them through the system. So you would have multiple cables. They would all be tied together. In this example, I only have one. So you'd have all your Ethernet wires here, all your BNCs here, and you would just push them through the back top of the system here, and you'll see a little bit of foam insulation. And you're just going to feed the wire right through, second wire right through. And these we're just going to lay right on top of this KVM switch. And the first connection is the back of the quad splitter. This is important to number your cables properly. So booth 1 is actually going to connect to connection 1. This way, if you ever have a problem with your quad video, we know where to look at. The other wire, the Ethernet wire, we're going to slide right through the quad splitter and the top of this switch up here. And then we're going to connect it from the front. Once you have all the cables pushed through the top of the switch here, we're going to go ahead and just connect them to the front of this one. We're not ever going to connect anything to the lower two. This is simply strictly for boosts. Now the cables themselves, technically it doesn't matter which one you plug it into. They'll all communicate properly. You could plug it in any one you want. We just suggest putting booth 1 to slot 1, booth 2 to slot 2. That way if you ever encounter any problems, we know which cable to look for. So just follow that same pattern. Connect the BNC to the back of the quad splitter, connect the Ethernet to the front of the switch, and your booths are ready to go. Now you're pretty much done in the server room. The only thing you have left to do is put the doors on. This isn't a requirement, it's just a personal preference. Some people like to leave the doors off so they have easy access. Some people like to put the doors on to keep the dust away from the system. We do recommend putting them back on, and they're just going to go on in the opposite order of taking them off.